telling you, the video makes me want to run through a brick wall. Like, I'm just, yes, here we go. Put me in the Super Bowl tonight. I am really excited to continue this series. We've been walking through the life of Joseph, and Joseph is just such a powerful story when you see the adversity he faced, and we look at how God works triumph in the midst of it. Today, we're going to be tackling a topic that is hard because it's so personal. That topic is betrayal. Now, how many people are familiar with the story of Julius Caesar, right? At least roughly, okay? Maybe you haven't read Shakespeare, maybe you've seen a movie, maybe you're just kind of generally familiar. So Julius Caesar is in Rome, and he's rising to power, and at a time when power was pretty spread out, a lot of power was consolidating. People loved Julius Caesar, and he looked like he might become emperor. And so they planned a coup against him and an assassination. And so 60 senators conspired against Julius Caesar to kill him so he couldn't become emperor. And 23 different senators ended up stabbing him. But there's one line that if you're familiar with the story of Julius Caesar at all, you probably have heard before. Et tu, Brute. Does anyone know what that means? And you, Brutus. Thank you. Wow, it's got some Latin experts. Great. That's such a powerful line, and maybe even if you're like, oh yeah, I have heard that. Et tu, Brute, it means, and you also, Brutus, or you too, Brutus. You see, amongst the 60 conspirators and amongst the 23 people who plan a coup against Julius Caesar, one of those is Brutus. And Brutus is somebody that Julius Caesar cared for. They were friends. He was almost like a protege to Julius Caesar. And so in that moment, Julius Caesar, and this was a rumor that he said this long before Shakespeare ever put it into a play, but that in this moment where he's being killed, that he would look upon his friend and say, how could you too? You also, Brutus. Right? And it's interesting. I think the reason why that line stands out for so many of us, it's not just because it's probably the easiest Latin line that you could come across. Like, it's fairly straightforward for those of us like me who don't really know Latin. But it strikes at something so near and dear to our heart. Because it's one thing to expect the world to hurt you. It's one thing to expect people who don't like you to come and assassinate you. But for your friend? I can just imagine Caesar, of course these people don't want me to have all this power, but Brutus, I trusted you. It's for that same reason that William Blake, who was a Romanticist period poet and artist, he once said this. He said, it is easier to forgive an enemy than to forgive a friend. Because I expect my enemies to do things against me, and so sometimes it's easy. But when it's a friend, somebody I trust, it's a whole different game. And so what we're talking about today is betrayal. When we trust, when we love, and those that we love and trust hurt us. They betray our trust. Now this could be in big, grand ways, in the case of Joseph or in Caesar. I know most people in here pretty well. I feel pretty confident saying that none of you have been ascending to emperor in Rome and been stabbed by your best friend. I feel pretty safe saying that. And yet we've all experienced betrayal on different levels. And again, some of them grand, some of them small. But times when we trust somebody, we put our love and faith in somebody, and they betray us. They let us down. They hurt us. So we're going to be looking at the story of Joseph and the betrayal that he faces, and looking at the story of Jesus, who is one who is betrayed, to learn more about what do we do when we're betrayed? How do we handle that? And also, when we betray somebody's trust, how do we go about repairing that as well? And so we're going to be looking at Joseph here and talking about triumph over betrayal. Now, just a little bit of a recap of where we are in the story. So Joseph, again, he's one of 12 brothers. He's the favorite child. His brothers don't like him very much. He has these dreams that his brothers' grains are going to bow down. Their crops are going to bow down to his crop. He has another dream where his brothers, who are stars, and his father and mother, who are moon and sun, bow down to him. And so he has these dreams that one day his family's going to bow down to him. He shares this with them. They don't like that. They end up planning to kill him, right? And then they eventually have a bit of a change of heart due to Reuben, the oldest brother, and they end up throwing him in a pit, selling him off into slavery. Then we follow Joseph. He goes into slavery in Egypt. He's in a household. He's faithful. He is good. His master's wife tries to seduce him. He remains faithful and does not give in. He triumphs over temptation. But she makes up a story about him, and he gets thrown in jail. Then he's in jail, and he's interpreting the dreams of these two other prisoners. And one of them, he interprets the dream is going to be restored to their position. He says, hey, when you're back with Pharaoh, tell him about me, okay? Remember me. For the other one, he says, okay, this is not going to end well. You're going to be executed. Both the dreams come true. Eventually, after 2 long, long years, the one who is restored, remembers him and tells Pharaoh when Pharaoh has these dreams about a famine that's coming. Joseph goes to Pharaoh, and it's a lot, just to get us up to speed. Pharaoh has these dreams that there's going to be 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. Joseph interprets them, and now he's in charge of basically almost everything in Egypt. Next to Pharaoh, there's like no other. And so now all of a sudden, Joseph, who's gone on this path, right? So things are going well. He's a favorite child. He's enjoying life with his family. His brothers try and murder him. He gets sold off into slavery. He's faithful as a servant. He gets imprisoned. But now God has brought him all the way to the point where he's like Pharaoh's right-hand man. So things have gone really, really well for him now, and God has remained faithful through it all. And so this is something we read last week, but I just want to highlight this because this shows what kind of state Joseph is in when we continue today. This is from Genesis 41. Before the year of the famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph. So Joseph has 2 sons that are born. Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, bore to him. So this is his wife's name. And then names in the Bible are significant. So Joseph called the name of his firstborn Manasseh, for he said, God has made me to forget all my hardships and all my father's house. So Manasseh is a Hebrew word. It sounds like the word for to forget. So Joseph names his firstborn basically forget, because God has allowed me to forget all the hardships that I've faced. The name of the second he called Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. And then not surprising, Ephraim means fruitful. So he names his sons Forget and Fruitful, which is fun. If you're looking for baby names. I don't know if, Stephen, you considered those. I don't know. Luis is better, I think. But here, Joseph names this because this is the state he's in. He's thanking God. God, you know what? All that I've gone through, you've allowed me to forget it. Oh, man, life's going so good. And you've allowed me to be so fruitful. I've gone through all these hardships. And he just thanks God in the naming of his children. So at this point, Joseph's living a good life. He's in Egypt. He's Pharaoh's right-hand man. He's kind of forgotten about all that he's had to endure, and now things are going well. But his past is about to come back to him, and that's where we're going to be looking at today, is what happens when his past comes back into the present. So everything we've been reading has been following Joseph for a little bit, but now we're going to jump back to the rest of the family. Genesis 42. When Jacob, that's Joseph's dad, learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" And he said, "Behold, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt, but Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers, for he feared that harm might happen to him. Thus the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. So as a recap, as part of Joseph's position, because God gave him the knowledge that there would be this famine after 7 years of plenty, he told Pharaoh, let's store up as much as we can on the front end, so when the famine comes, everywhere else is going to be affected and nobody's going to have any food, but we'll have stored up all this food. So now that rumor comes to Joseph's family, Jacob hears that, hey, Egypt, apparently it's the one place in the world with food. So he's looking at his sons like, hey, what are you guys doing sitting around here? We have no food. Go. I heard there's food in Egypt. Go get us some food. That's basically what he sends. He sends them on this mission. Now, he sends only 10 of them because, if you remember, Joseph has one full brother, Benjamin. They're the only 2 that are born to their mother, Rachel. And still playing a bit of favorites, Jacob, just like he lost Joseph, who was his favorite, now he's worried he's going to lose his other son from that woman, from Rachel. And so he holds Benjamin back. He doesn't want anything to happen to him. But he sends the other 10 to Egypt to get some food. And this is what we're told then. Now, Joseph was governor over the land. So he's kind of ruling everything next to Pharaoh. He was the one who sold to all the peoples of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he treated them like strangers and spoke roughly to them. "Where do you come from?" he said. They said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of them. So they show up in Egypt. And we don't know how much they would have thought, hey, this is where we sold Joseph to. We're not sure. It doesn't tell us. But nevertheless, they, for all intents and purposes, think that their brother Joseph is probably dead, right? They sold him to slavery off. Who knows what happened to him? So they just come up to this random Egyptian that they think and basically hey, can we buy some food? And he recognizes them immediately. I mean, when you have 10 brothers you spend your whole life with, you're going to remember them. They don't recognize him, though. And so there's this interaction there. He's treating them like a stranger. We're not sure if it's frustration or he's testing them or what's going on, but he treats them in this way. So he asks them kind of roughly, "Where do you come from?" And they're telling him, we come from the land of Canaan to buy food. And then we're told here, this is where Joseph remembers his dreams, right? This is what got him in the trouble in the first place. I had these dreams that my brothers would bow down to me. And now all of a sudden he's standing there with his brothers bowing down to him, right? So this prophecy was fulfilled. And so now the question for Joseph is, how's he going to react to this, right? So now all of a sudden, for the first time maybe in his entire life, he has a chance to actually act against his betrayers. You think about that for a second. For the longest time, he's gone. He thinks he's never going to see them again. Look how the power has flipped, right? Before, when he was thrown into a pit, it was 10-on-1. He didn't stand much of a chance. But now he's governor of Egypt. And here they are bowing down, asking. And when you think about betrayal, there's so many ways that we respond when somebody breaks our trust, right? So when you've had somebody, maybe it's a friend who's spoken badly behind your back, and you thought you were close, and you thought, hey, this is somebody who's always going to vouch for me, and then you found out they went and gossiped about you or kind of joined into the crowd and putting you down. Or if you're married, to have your husband or wife break your trust, whether it's infidelity, whether it's lying to you, right? This person that you vowed to commit your whole life to be open and vulnerable with. Maybe it's a family member, right, who you entrusted, hey, I really need you to do this. And they say, yes, I promise I will, and then they let you down. There's so many cases where we can put our trust in somebody and feel betrayed. And then the reaction to it can be this wide range of kind of self-preservation, right? So sometimes we lash out. Sometimes we want to stick it to them. I just want them to feel as hurt as I feel. And so we're going to pull out every arsenal that we have. What kind of insults, what kind of get-backs can I pull out? Sometimes we close off. We feel so hurt that we just don't even want to talk to them. Maybe we close off from everybody, and I'm just going to go into this shell, and I'm going to just protect my heart. I'm not going to talk to anybody. Often we have a tendency to stew on these things. When somebody betrays our trust, it is so painful that it can just be all-consuming, and it's hard to think about anything else. The author Flannery O'Connor has this really powerful short story, and in the story there's a grandson and a grandfather. And the grandson and the grandfather, their family, they love each other, but they have their issues. They go back and forth sometimes. And there's a point in the story where Nelson, the grandson, desperately needs his grandfather. And his grandfather realizes that by helping him, I'm going to pull myself into this mess. And so his grandfather actually denies that he's even his grandson in front of a whole crowd of people. And it's this moment where even the crowd is just like, how in the world could you do that? And this boy feels so betrayed, feels so hurt. And Flannery O'Connor, when she's describing in this short story what Nelson is thinking about, she has this really powerful depiction of Nelson's mind and what he's thinking about after being betrayed. So they're walking along, and the grandfather's trying to talk and make things better. But this is what she says about Nelson. As for Nelson, his mind had frozen around his grandfather's treachery as if he were trying to preserve it intact to present at the final judgment. How often, when somebody betrays your trust, when somebody hurts you, you want to hold every detail in place, right? Oh, yeah, I can't forget. Oh, they also said that. Oh, yeah, and they also did that one thing. And it's almost like we're trying to keep it perfectly. So later, whether we're talking to them or we're talking to God, we can say, look at what they did to me, right? Like we're trying to keep it perfectly intact. What Flannery O'Connor is getting at is that there's this tendency when we are betrayed or hurt that we want to hold on to that. Because in some weird way, it's so meaningful. And this is where the hurt is real. And sometimes to just kind of push on feels like we're not doing it justice. And so we hang on to this. We hang out over that person. And so that's one way that Joseph could respond to this, right? That's one way that all of us have an option to respond, right? We can lash out. We can pretend it didn't happen. We can close off. We can preserve every little detail. But in Joseph's life, he's gonna continue to talk to them, and we're going to see where he goes on from here and how he responds to this. So again, we don't know exactly why he's saying all that he's saying, but in some ways he's testing his brothers. He's trying to see what they're up to. He's trying to learn more information. So again, they don't recognize him. Continuing on the story, and Joseph said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." They said to him, "No, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." So in this little back and forth, and again, we don't get to see inside Joseph's mind all the reasoning, but basically he accuses them. It's like, you guys are just spies. You're trying to figure out where we are vulnerable here in Egypt so you can plan an attack or come raid us or something. And so they're like, no, we're not. They call themselves servants, trying to be humble. We've just come to buy food. And then they're trying to make a case. So this is when you go through, if you go through customs going to a new country, they ask you questions to make sure your story's legit, that you're not there for a sketchy reason. So like, oh, what are you here for? What are you bringing? Who are you going to visit? What'd you all do? And so they're trying to give a bit of an alibi. And they're like, we're all sons of one man, right? First off, spies would probably not be all in one family. But second of all, they're trying to build a story of, no, here's who we actually are. We're honest men. We've never been spies. We're not here to take advantage of Egypt. We're just here to buy some food. Continues on, and Joseph said to them, no, it is the nakedness of the land that you have come to see. And they said, we, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. So they're trying to give more details. They're trying to show, no, we're really not spies. We didn't rehearse this. I swear we have an alibi. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more. So they're acknowledging there's 12 of us brothers. One is still with our dad. So Joseph learns that his dad and his youngest brother are alive. And then they acknowledge that their one brother, they don't know they're talking to him, is no more. But Joseph said to them, it is as I said to you, you are spies. By this you shall be tested. So he's saying, if your alibi is true, here's what you'll do. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not go from this place until your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him bring your brother while you remain confined, that your words may be tested whether there is truth in you. Or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. So here's his little test for them. He's testing his brothers. Basically says, all right, so you're going to be in jail for 3 days. Then I need you to send one of you, the other 9 can stay here, go get your youngest brother. If your story's true and your youngest brother is still with your dad, go bring him here, and then I'll know that you're not spies. So that's the story that's his kind of plan for them. Continues on here. On the 3rd day, so after the 3 days in jail, Joseph said to them, do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined where you are in custody, and let the rest go and carry grain for the famine of your households. And bring your youngest brother to me. So notice he flips here. At first he says, 9 of you are going to stay confined. One of you is going to go back and fetch your brother. He's actually showing them mercy here because now he's only going to keep one confined for 3 days. And he's going to send 9 of them to the brother. And so this actually is nice too because he can send more grain with them. Even in the ways that he's testing them, he's also showing mercy and blessing them. He's sending 9 brothers to carry as much grain as they can for their household, with the task that they need to bring their youngest brother in order to get the one who stays back from jail. So your words will be verified and you shall not die. And they did so. Then they said to one another, in truth, we are guilty concerning our brother, and that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us and we did not listen. That is why this distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? But you did not listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. So again, he flips it out. I'm going to send 9 back. Go get your youngest brother if you want to get this one out of jail. I'm going to keep one of you. And then they start talking amongst themselves. And basically, this is all because of what we did to our brother Joseph. This is God's punishment for us, right? The bill has finally come due. Reuben is then calling him out and says, I told you not to do this. If you remember the story, Reuben tried to save Joseph. It's just that when he was out of the room, he was gone. They sold him off to slavery before he could stop it. And so they're having this whole conversation. Basically, this is God's punishment against us. We betrayed our brother, and now we deserve this. They did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. Think about this for a second. So Joseph is talking them through an interpreter because he's trying to keep up his disguise. So he's speaking Egyptian. An interpreter then speaks Hebrew to them, and then back and forth. And then they have a little conversation in Hebrew about, this is because we did this to our brother, and think about how he begged and he pleaded us not to do this. This is all guilty. And Reuben's like, I told you guys not to do it. And they don't know the whole time Joseph can understand all of it. I can't even imagine the pain of hearing your brothers discuss what they did to you, unaware that you're in the room, that you can understand all of it. And so Joseph is overwhelmed by this. Then he turned away from them and wept. So he didn't want them to see him crying because it might give away his disguise. So he turned away and started crying. Then he eventually returns to them and spoke to them. And he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. And Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain and to replace every man's money in his sack and to give them provisions for the journey. This was done for them. So he sends 9 of them on their way. He keeps Simeon. Interestingly, Simeon's the second oldest, and so in a lot of cultures, right, the oldest would be perceived as having the most value. But Joseph just learned that the oldest actually tried to save him. So we don't know exactly why he chooses Simeon, but it could be that, like, okay, I was going to keep Reuben, but Reuben, you vouched for me, man. You get a pass. And so Simeon gets thrown into jail until they can swap him out or bring Benjamin, the youngest brother. And so then he says, all right, they brought these bags with money. Take the money, give them as much grain as they can, and then send them on their way. Make sure they have food for their journey. This was done for them. Then they loaded their donkeys with their grain and departed. And as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, he saw his money in the mouth of his sack. He said to his brothers, my money has been put back. Here it is in the mouth of my sack. At this, their hearts failed them, and they turned trembling to one another, saying, what is this that God has done to us? So they get partway back. At one point, they stop, and one of them goes to feed his donkey, opens up his sack, that they were supposed to take the money out and put the grain in, and all of a sudden, he's like, there's still money in here. Ugh. Now look, they're worried because now it's like, geez, now it looks like we stole from them. Like, we didn't try and do this. We tried to be righteous and honest. And notice who they blame for all this. Why is God doing this to us? They still see this as part of their punishment, right? God is doing something to us for the great sin and betrayal that we've committed. Continuing on, they get home. And when they came to Jacob, their father, in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them, saying, the man, the Lord of the land, spoke roughly to us and took us to be spies of the land. But we said to him, we are honest men. We have never been spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father, one who is no more, and the youngest is this day with our father in the land of Canaan. Then the man, the Lord of the land, said to us, by this I shall know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me and take grain for the famine of your households and go your way. Bring your youngest brother to me, then I shall know that you are not spies, but honest men, and I will deliver your brother to you, and you shall trade in the land. So they come back and they give the report. They're like, hey, Dad, here's what happened. We went there, and this guy, he spoke really roughly to us. He thought we were spies. And so the way that he ended up giving us grain is that we had to leave behind Simeon. He doesn't say anything about them being imprisoned. Like, they leave that detail out, I guess. And the fact that Simeon's not just left behind. He's in jail. But basically, hey, we got to bring back Benjamin because this is part of our alibi, and that way we can, he knows we're not spies. And then Jacob's response to this is, as they emptied their sacks, behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. So now, not only one found money, they realized all of their bags still have their money. And when they and their father saw their bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob, their father, said to them, you have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more. So he writes off Simeon as good as dead at this point. And now you would take Benjamin. All this has come against me. Then Reuben said to his father, kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you. But he said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm should happen to him on the journey that you are to make, you would bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to Sheol. So this is a continuing story of Jacob is just, he's not like a model of like, be like Jacob. Can you imagine if you're a dad, so you believe you lost one of your sons, you still have a favorite, you're preserving that son, and then your other sons come back and they're like, hey, we had to leave behind Simeon, all we need to do is show them Benjamin, and then we'll get Simeon back. And he's like, no, Simeon, he's dead. I'm not letting you kill Benjamin, right? Notice how he says his brother is dead. So he's acknowledging, he doesn't say your brother, he says Benjamin's brother. Like, he's still linking and favoriting Joseph and Benjamin. And so he's basically at this point saying, I'm not letting you bring Benjamin. Now Reuben, who's the oldest, right? He's the one who wanted to make things right. He's the one who didn't want Joseph to be sold off. He offers his own children. He says, Dad, if we don't come back with Benjamin safely, like, you can have my kids, right? Now, Jacob obviously doesn't want to sacrifice his grandchildren. But Reuben is trying to save his brother despite Jacob's hesitation. Jacob's very concerned on himself. He says, why has this happened to me, right? He doesn't say, why did this happen to Joseph and Simeon? He says, why has all this happened to me? So that finishes chapter 42, and we're going to continue in the next coming weeks of this interaction between Joseph and his brothers and how Joseph deals with all of this. But what we see from this snapshot is Joseph, who is in this time of man, like, life is good, I've forgotten about my hardships. Now all of a sudden the past comes back, and he has to stand face to face with the people who betrayed him, face to face with the people who hurt him, who threw him to a pit, who sold him off to slavery and told his dad that he was killed by an animal. And although we don't know the whole reason for why he's interacting, what we see is they realize we deserve punishment for what we've done, right? For our betrayal, God is punishing us in some way, shape, or form. And what this starts to point us to is, as we've talked about, Joseph is this prototype, this picture of what Jesus will come to be. Because Jesus was somebody who looked at a world full of betrayers. You think about God's trust in humanity. He said, I love you so much, I'm going to give you free reign to go and care for this creation. Right? His people, Israel, I love you, I've preserved you, I've walked with you. They betray him over and over. They go against false gods. And then Jesus, when he comes down to earth, even in his closest inner circle, he is one who betrays him. So if you look at the listing of the 12 disciples in the book of Matthew chapter 10, I just want to highlight a couple things. So this is in Matthew, this is Jesus calling his 12 disciples listed. And Jesus called to him his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal every disease and every affliction. The names of the 12 apostles are these. First, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James the son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, Simon the zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. So right off the bat, when you're told who the 12 disciples are, you're already told, hey, there's one of these that betrays Jesus. For the people reading this gospel, that wasn't news to them. But the question is, how did Judas get in this circle, right? He didn't weasel his way in. Jesus called him and gave him authority. So Jesus calls Peter and says, I'm going to make you a fisher of men. Hey, James and John, come with me and I'm going to show you great wonders. Judas, come and be my disciple. All along knowing that Judas was going to betray every ounce of trust, every ounce of love that Jesus showed him. Judas watches all of this unfold, and Jesus does all of this wonderful, miraculous ministry and care and love and sacrifice, all while one is there who's going to betray him, turn his back on him, sell him for silver, sell him for money. Later in the book of Matthew, when you have the Last Supper, they're all gathered the night that Jesus is betrayed. We're told this, when it was evening, he reclined at table with the 12, and as they were eating, he said, truly I say to you, one of you will betray me. So he's eating with his 12 closest followers, this magical night when it's all coming to a culmination of all of his ministry. They can tell, man, this is the Passover, something special is happening. And he says, I'm telling you, one of you 12 is going to betray me. Right? They know the Pharisees don't like him. They know the Sadducees and the religious leaders and the political leaders, they don't like him. But one of you 12, who I've lived with for 3 years, who I've walked with, who's talked to me every single day, one of you is going to turn your back on me. And they were very sorrowful and began to say to him, one after another, is it I, Lord? He answered, he who has dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me. So this picture of, this is how intimate they are, right? They're all sharing a meal together. They're all dipping in the same dish. Also, I can't imagine Jesus saying, hey, one of you is going to betray me, and we're like, is it me? I don't know. I feel like you'd know, but at the same time, they're sorrowful. They don't know, and they're trying to listen to Jesus. He continues on. He says, the Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born. Judas, who would betray him, answered, is it I, Lord? Is it I, Rabbi? He said to him, you have said so. So this picture, this intimate meal, Jesus has revealed all of these things, and the fact that one of those who has shared food with him, who has shared tenting with him, who has shared all things with him for these years, is going to turn his back on Jesus. You think of all the crowds that get to see a miracle here and there, and some believe, some don't, but you think of somebody who walked with Jesus for so long, that wasn't there by an accident. He wasn't a spy. He was just somebody Jesus called, somebody Jesus gave authority to, somebody Jesus trusted. And it was this Judas who betrayed him. And then Jesus, like Simeon, would have to spend 3 days in prison. Not in an earthly prison, but the prison of death. Because of this betrayal. Because of punishment that he actually didn't deserve. So just as Benjamin was called for to free Simeon, so Jesus looked at this world that betrayed him, looked at even Judas, who he died for, and the betrayed took the punishment for the betrayers. And Jesus looked at a world that had rejected him and allowed it to betray him one last time and to kill the Lord of life. But the good news about Jesus and about our God is that we do not have a God who's willing to let betrayal win. Rather, taking the full weight of all of it, he was not going to let betrayal get the last word. And he triumphed in rising from the dead. Right? As we sang earlier, hope came from the ashes. And it was only in allowing himself to be betrayed by Judas, by the people he came to save, breaking all of his trust, that new life was born. And for you and for me, for all the times that we betray God's trust, the times when he's like, hey, I trust you so much, take this, do good with these gifts, and we abuse them. God says, I love you so much, I will be your God, be my people. And we choose to worship other things with our time, our efforts, our heart. When we come to him, betrayal does not win, but ultimately, Jesus' love does. And so he spent 3 days in the prison of death to rise victoriously on Easter morning so that we might not have to live in fear of betrayal. Because like I said, one of the ways that sometimes we respond is that we try and just preserve and protect. I bet all of us can probably find somebody that we've come across, maybe we've heard about, who is so deeply hurt that they just became cold and heartless, turned off from the world and just refusing to open themselves up to love. But the problem is, we were never meant to live that way, right? One of the first things when God creates a human, he creates Adam, he says it's not good that man should be alone. We're not meant to be closed off forever. And so we have to love God and love one another, risking the risk of betrayal, confident that God will never betray us. In Joseph's case, he was betrayed by his brothers. He was betrayed by Potiphar's wife. He was betrayed by the cupbearer who said, hey, I'll remember you. But God was with him through it all. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to have all the prospering that comes in Joseph's life. But it means that to the end of the age, God is going to be right there with you through it all. That he will not forsake you or abandon you. And here's the reality. When it comes to loving, you need to expect that when you love, you will get hurt at times. Brian Waters, in his book, Everyday Virtues and Ordinary Callings, it's this beautiful book about just the importance of the everyday mundane things we do. He has a section on friendship. And he talks about that one of the dangers of friendship is that you're opening yourself up to somebody who can hurt you, right? But he says that's to be expected. He plays around, he talks about some C.S. Lewis quotes here. So this is Brian Waters, but then the quote inside of it is C.S. Lewis. He says this, love in any of its forms is never safe. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly broken. Only in hell is one safe from love. To love is to open yourself up to hurt. If Jesus did not love the world, he wouldn't have been crucified. But if he didn't love the world, he wouldn't have risen. And so the challenge for us as Christians is that in life, you will love people who are going to let you down. You will love people who will betray your trust. And part of the reaction is not, don't hear me saying that just pretend it doesn't happen. Because the triumph over betrayal, you don't have to pretend that it didn't happen. That's one reaction. Sometimes we want to be so nice as Christians. We're just like, oh, it's fine. It didn't really hurt. It didn't really matter. It mattered to Jesus. He knew what Judas was going to do. He still loved Judas. He was still willing to be hurt. It mattered to Jesus. He still had to take on the sins of the whole world. It wasn't like he just forgot about them or pretended that nobody had betrayed him or turned their back on him. So we can sit here and live with the fullness of, yeah, that hurt me. That was real, right? Jesus didn't pretend it didn't happen. He forgave. There's a difference. And so as we close, I just want to reflect on a couple things. First off, when we betray somebody's trust, how we go about reconciling. And then secondly, when somebody has betrayed our trust, how we can start to heal and move forward. Again, looking at what Jesus has called us to in a life as Christians, a life in this real world. So when you've betrayed somebody's trust, when you have broken somebody's trust, and again, this is the hard thing about being a human, is not only that you'll be hurt, but for me, the far worst thing is that I'm going to hurt people. It hurts way more. So when you betray somebody's trust, first, repent and seek forgiveness when able. Now I realize not all the time are you able to do this. If you've betrayed somebody's trust who has since died and gone to the Lord, I realize you can't go talk to that person. Maybe life circumstances have pulled you apart, they're far away. But when you're able, if you know that you've hurt somebody, you've broken their trust, you've betrayed them, repent, apologize, and seek their forgiveness. It doesn't guarantee they're going to forgive you, but what can you do? I can go and I say, I am sorry. I realize what I've done. Please forgive me. Go to God in prayer. And this is especially comforting when you can't talk to that person, but we have a God who tells us that every sin against somebody else is also a sin against him. And so we ask for God's forgiveness. We ask for his restoration. We ask for his blessing on the situation, for him to repair the damage that we've caused, that we've inflicted on the situation. And then with that, finally, we entrust the situation to his care. Because here's one of the hard things. When you break somebody's trust, when you betray somebody, trust does not come back fast. It's a slow process. And one of the challenges is sometimes when we hurt somebody, we want things to go back to normal so quick. And every time we look at them, it's just a little bit of a reminder of how things used to be, and things are weird because of what I've done. And so we just have to trust God's care. God, I've apologized. I'm seeking to make things better. Now I'm asking you just to bless the situation. Because the God that is with you when you're betrayed is also with them when they're betrayed. The God that is with you when you are hurt is also with them when they are hurt. So God, please take care of them. Please bless them. Please help me to do what I can do. And I'm trusting this over into your care because I can't do it on my own. And sometimes that takes time. Again, we talked last week about God's timing. This doesn't repair overnight. And yet I trust that God will continue to work according to his wisdom. And then finally, when somebody has betrayed your trust, when somebody has hurt you, first off, go to God and his people with your pain. Don't pretend it didn't happen. Don't say, oh, it's nothing. Again, the Bible is filled with laments. The Bible is filled with people calling out to God and saying, how could you let this happen? Right? Just like Joseph's brothers who are saying, why is God doing this to us? We can go to him. God does not ask us to pretend that pain doesn't hurt. But we turn to him, we turn to his people for comfort and counsel. This is why we bear with one another. When somebody's hurting, we all hurt. And so I'm not going to just hold this in on my own. Again, I'm not seeking to overburden people, but we share in this together. We pray that God will help us to forgive. So this is hard, right? If you've been hurt, if your trust has been betrayed or broken, it is hard to forgive. And so that's why sometimes it's not an overnight like, oh, yep, I'm all good. Let's move on as normal. So we ask God, can you help me soften my heart to forgive this person in due time, right? The issue is when we just decide from the outset, I'm never forgiving you for this, right? And so we need God's help, right? It's only through his Holy Spirit that we can forgive. And then finally, we use counsel and discernment deciding the next course of action. And this is why we have a community to talk through these things. This is why I'm here as a pastor, Pastor Andrew's here, because every relationship's different. When your coworker betrays you, you have a different responsibility than when your spouse betrays you. If let's say your boss at work says you're going to get a promotion, I promise you it's going to be great, and then they get to the board meeting and they're like, just kidding, I just wanted to say that to them to get them to get off my back. They betrayed your trust. You don't owe them the same responsibility. Now you should forgive them, but you don't have to stay at that company. The end goal isn't, well, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to fix everything as it is. But if I'm married and my spouse betrays my trust and promises me like, hey, I promise that I'm going to get this pulled together and promise I'm going to start paying the bills on time, and then they don't, they break our trust and betray the faith that we put in them, there's a different responsibility you have because you've made vows to that person, for better or for worse, till death do us part. And so this is where there's wisdom and there's counsel and there's no clean answer. And when you have a friend who betrays you, what does that friendship have to look like in the future? There's no one cookie cutter, here's what your friendship should look like after betrayal. Now you should work towards forgiveness, but this is where you don't have to open up your heart fully to everybody all the time. Hey, you look nice. All right, here's all my trust and love. Hey, you look nice. Here's all my love and trust. Hurt me. Come on. I love the pain. Rather, we use wisdom. Who are those people God has called me? In this relationship, what is God calling me towards? And again, we don't figure this out on our own. We go to God's word, we pray, and we talk to fellow Christians. Hey, this person really hurt me. I don't know how to go forward. Can you help me think this through? And so when somebody's hurt our trust, we go to God and his people, we pray that God will help us forgive, and then we use counsel to figure out what's the next course of action. Where do we go from here? Because I don't know. And there's no one clean path. There's no one like step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the beauty. Our God works in all the messiness. Because that's the thing about betrayal is you never see it coming. At least you usually shouldn't. And you never know how it's gonna manifest. But in all of those cases, as we sang earlier, God is still sovereign over all of it. He is still sovereign in my life. He's still watching over. He's still sovereign in that person's life. He still cares and loves them. And so just like Joseph, there's times where we're going to look at somebody who has deeply hurt us. And like Jesus, who looked at those who deeply hurt him, we choose to love. We choose to forgive. And hopefully, in doing so, the hope that we have can be for those around us too. A witness. How do we triumph over betrayal? We commit it to God. We look to Christ. We follow his example and put it all in his hands. May we triumph over betrayal with God's power and in his love. In Jesus' name, amen.